Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, and I've got a great guest today. His name is Mr. Robert Mixon. He owns a company called Level 5 Associates. And Robert and I are going to talk about what he calls the 3 U's. And the 3 U's are about how we see ourselves, how others see us, and how our real self is real, and how these interrelate for getting into the top 1% of earners and for leadership. Now, Robert's a very interesting man. He served 30 years in the military. He was a general in the United States Army. He brings a lot of that learning into the business world and a lot of that into the leadership capacity of the business world. He's got brilliant things that he's talking about in this podcast. I can't wait for you to hear these concepts and how they apply and how we break them down, and how just 3 basic concepts: how you see yourself, how others see you, and who you really are, how they translate into your daily life, in your business, in your personal life, how they grow or detract from your business, how they grow or detract from you as the person and the people around you. And when you apply the principles positively, how they actually shape and grow things to levels that some people just go, wow, that's kind of magical. So without further ado, let's go talk to Robert right now. Robert, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Doug. I'm glad we could spend a few minutes and chat today.
Yeah, it's firstly, I want to say thank you for all the years of military service that you put in over 30 years in the United States Army. So thank you so much. Let's talk about what you call the 3 U's and about how you see yourself, how others see you, and this really unique concept. So would you explain it, please, and how it applies to leadership?
Yeah, glad to, Doug. You know, what I found in my journey of mistakes in leadership along the way, for the most part, is that one of the challenges I faced, and I've seen other senior leaders face, is the resolving the 3 U's. We really have 3 of them. There's 3 U's. There's the you that you think you are. There's the you that others think you are. And there's the real you. And reconciling that real you is a very difficult challenge for most of us. It was for me for many years. And I think I have my moments today. The men and women I know who are in senior leadership positions in the military and the corporate world, I think all of us struggle at points in time with finding the real you.
It's an important concept. I think that embodies what really true happiness is, right? When we really are in that place. And for people who, are growing their revenues in their company, people who want to be in the top 1%, it's extremely important to understand, I believe, that in order to have longevity in the process.
Yeah, I agree. I believe that discovering the real you and then rediscovering the real you on a regular basis is essential for senior leaders to have the type of balance in their organizations, and when they look in the mirror, that's healthy, that creates the conditions for longevity, that creates conditions for profitability, creates the conditions for being at a level of excellence that I call level 5 leadership. And that excellence, this wasn't my original thought. I don't know if I've ever had one, but if you think about, Jim Collins and John C. Maxwell and other thinkers who sort of created the terminology of level 5 leadership and the journey along those levels, to get from a junior initial leader to one that is really among the rarest of rare as a level 5 leader. You must understand who you are and what you represent. And one of my favorite tools for doing that is a daily audit. Every day for 10 or 15 minutes, I isolate myself from electronics and all the digital noise, my radio in the car. I mean, I'm not driving the car when I'm doing this. In fact, I know some executives who actually just, if they are driving home when there's time for their daily audit, they pull into a rest stop and just turn off the vehicle, put the phone down. They can't hear it or see it. And they ask themselves, a couple of critical questions. One is, what did I do today to see myself effectively? What did I do today? What did I plan to do that I didn't do? How did I help grow other leaders to see themselves effectively? And then what am I going to do tomorrow to move the needle a little bit more to the right, so that in myself and in others, I'm facilitating this process of reconciling the 3 U's, of seeing yourself in a holistic way and having others see themselves in a holistic way. And then we interact together in a more open, transparent, and honest relationship. And that's really where I think the value is here. When we can be genuine, if you and I can be genuine with each other in our relationship as leaders together in a high-performing company, that gives us the ability to have tough conversations, to disagree respectfully, to think outside the proverbial box, and not have to worry about impression management being our dominant, form of thinking. And so the 3 U's for me has been a very powerful tool in being able to work with exceptional leaders, to learn from them, and I think to realize more of my potential and theirs.
So also sounds like it is a great lesson for a marriage too.
Well, yeah, Ruth and I will celebrate our 49th anniversary here in June. And I would say candidate for sainthood would probably be an understatement if my description of her. But certainly that ability to be genuine with each other has gotten us through a lot of tough spots.
I would imagine. Now, is this being genuine? You said it creates connections or creates conditions. Is it because we're authentic that the conditions are created, or how does it manifest itself into that?
I think so, Doug. I think what we're talking about is that, intellectual, emotional honesty that opens communication lines. Impression management tends to put up barriers and create barriers and reinforce barriers in communication skills, individually and collectively. And yet we all have to realize that they're out there. People don't want to look ignorant. So, they don't ask questions. I mean, that's just it's a part of our human nature that we've evolved into. And we have to be aware of that and work hard at, not allowing impression management to dominate our interactions. There's some trust you have to build up with each other. And again, in reconciling the 3 U's, you got to be able to trust some of the input you get from other people that you may not like. The first U is who you think you are, right? I can look in the mirror and convince myself, pretty cool guy. But when you ask when others give you input as to who you are, you may not like what you hear. In some cases, people discount it because they didn't like to hear it. They don't learn from it. And the third part is that reconciliation. You don't want to be all things to all people, and you don't want to spend all your day just discarding your ego, because people want to be around leaders who are driven and who are focused and who have a high degree of personal will. So ego's not to be discarded here. We're just talking about balancing it with input you get from others and reconciling and having in that daily audit saying, okay, well, am I maintaining my balance and focus here, or am I beginning to believe the press clippings that are favorable about me and my company and sort of drink the Kool-Aid? Or am I taking it in sort of with a proverbial grain of salt and seeking input from others, taking it in, processing it, reconciling it, and learning a little, growing a little more every day, and doing the same thing with the leaders around me, helping them grow a little every day by understanding more of who they are and what they represent.
We're speaking with Mr. Robert Mixon, a company called Level 5 Associates. There's so many notes I have down on this paper already. So I would imagine you were originally a general in the United States Army, and
Yep.
and impression management. When you were speaking, I was thinking, how did this apply for you to be able to climb up the leadership ladders in the military? And is that very similar to climbing up the corporate ladder, if you will, or different?
I would say that there are characteristics that are unique in the military culture, just as there are characteristics that are unique in the corporate culture. Mm-hmm. In terms of impression management, in terms of reconciling who we are, what we represent. The military is far more collegial, I think, than some people believe it to be. Part of the challenge is we got 96% of adult Americans who have never served in the military. So with that, small percentage or large percentage of those who don't have practical experience in the military, they tend to develop some biases that are based on anecdotal information. And that, I'm not just discouraging the fact that it is what it is. I'm just saying that's some people formulate ideas and notions about military personalities that are a little bit jaded, and they think that we are not entirely genuine and open with one another because we have an image to protect and convey as a captain and a colonel and a general. There is some imagery that's important because soldiers are putting their lives in the hands of the men and women who have senior authority in the non-commissioned officer ranks and the officer ranks of the military. And that's an enormous amount of trust. That's when you're really putting it all on the line. And we need to project an image as military leaders of confidence, competence, as well as empathy. And I think the majority of my colleagues who set the example for me along the way and who served with me when we were senior officers together, they did just that. They projected the image and walked the talk of that image. In the corporate environment that I've been in, as in senior leadership in companies as well as advising senior leaders, which is what I do now, I feel as though some of the methodologies are not as well understood, because we don't have uniforms and rank insignia and flags, outside the door and this kind of thing. Well, I don't know if we necessarily need that. I think it's more important, perhaps, in the corporate leadership framework that we become very effective listeners to garner respect. I'm not saying we need to listen in the military. I am saying that you don't have that obvious separation sometimes or obvious identification sometimes.
Right.
And I think for corporate leaders, it's more important to set the conditions via your personality, given that you're not going to have on a uniform. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of, demonstrating and modeling curiosity as a senior leader. I think that's where the most powerful leadership qualities sort of emerge in those, civilian men and women I've been privileged to be around who have been extraordinary. And I have had that privilege.
Being one of those who were in the 4%, in the same entity that you were in, I always, and I know that the people when, because I was a non-commissioned officer and you certainly were a general, I always found that the people who I listened to were far more into camaraderie and into the mission, whether it was positive or negative. And the people that they respected as well as an officer were also the same way. And those people who were truthful and transparent about this, which I think goes back to impression management, what you're speaking about, those people were the most respected leaders in the military.
I agree. I agree, Doug. Those who, going back to modeling curiosity, which I think is a very powerful leadership skill. Those military leaders I was around and with who modeled that curiosity, I knew they cared. The old saying is, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care.
Yes.
Well, you could be a caring leader and still have tough conversations and still give orders that are difficult and still face hardships and adversity, and understand that, and acknowledge that we are in a dangerous environment and not all of us are going to get through this. And you can collectively buy into that kind of leadership when you know that he or she truly believes what they're telling you and the truth as they know it. And that's what I found in many of the military leaders, the outstanding leaders that I was around, that really resonated with me. I knew that they cared. I knew that they were telling me the truth as they knew it. And I knew that we were taking on difficult missions together. There's an old cartoon I saw once on Facebook or somewhere where they have a guy sitting on a throne directing people who are pulling a rope, and he's called the boss. And there's a picture below it where he's at the lead of the people pulling the rope, and he's called the leader. So you have boss at the top and leader at the bottom. Yep. To me, there's a big difference there. Directing activity in time and space is not really leadership. I think leadership is the art of getting one or more people to accomplish difficult tasks under trying circumstances. How do you do that? Well, you do that by leading from the front, both intellectually and physically and emotionally. And you have to be genuine to do that, for people to accept you, whether you're in uniform or not in uniform. I want to be around somebody who tells the truth as he or she knows it, who gives it their all, and who are willing to grab the rope and pull it with us every day if necessary, so that we all accomplish the mission.
I have found that in the people who are in the top 1% of earners in selling are employing exactly what you just said. And they recognize that when they go in to speak with somebody about selling or sales, that they are putting themselves in the difficult position with this person. They're aligning with this person and understanding that this decision is important not only to the person making the decision, the organization, and they align themselves in part of that as peers, like a peer-to-peer process, and they're the first to disengage if it's not the right thing for the clientele. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. I think that goes back to your impression management, because when they know who they are, who others are, and how the others see them, because if they don't know them, originally they're coming in, they're a salesperson. So, a negative stereotype,
right,
immediately. But there's a liar walking through my door.
There he comes. Yeah, his lips are moving. So, yeah.
Right. And as people in the military think everybody in the military is just, Rambo, right? That type of ridiculous stuff. But I think what you said was so invaluable about outside influences. Be careful of who you listen to. I guess that's the message I was getting, and how we take that internally impression and how that affects how the real you or the real us.
Yeah. If you can be vulnerable to being a pleaser and to take, depending on that second you, what others think of you. Right. And if you're over dependent on it, then I think you lose opportunity. You miss an opportunity to trust your instincts. You miss an opportunity to be willing to underwrite some mistakes in others, and help them grow while you help yourself grow. One of my favorite stories about a senior general that I had the privilege of serving with and experienced a lot with him is General Crosby Saint was the commander of U.S. forces in Europe when I was his aide de camp, which was a very challenging job, but very rewarding too. I was a young major, and we were flying somewhere, as we typically did every day. We flew somewhere in the world, and he was having a conversation with another senior officer, and it was not good news. This was not a good news conversation. And he said, "Well, I'll call you back in a few minutes and we'll talk, we'll get some more," because the first report is usually wrong anyway. So you get the first report, the wiser leaders let things process a little bit, and then they get a second report before you make a sudden decision, unless it's absolutely critical in time. But he said to me, Robert, there's two ways we could approach this. I could ask him the question, Robert, what were you thinking? Or I could ask the question, Robert, so what did we learn here? To me, that was a very powerful story because there were really two questions here, and one implied trust and the other implied distrust. So the three U's were being, subjugated in my want of a better term, in that first question. You were suppressing the genuine conversation, getting an honest report or answer. And you were trying to figure out, okay, who do we blame for this?
Right.
Second part of the question says, all right, people know who did what to whom and why, what do we learn here? What's our opportunity to learn? And I think that's where great leadership lives. General Saint demonstrated that day to me a leadership lesson I've never forgotten. And, I think we're fortunate, those of us who are around those kind of leaders, more often than not.
Right. I agree with you. And in leadership, what I've witnessed in, entrepreneurship and business with owners, CEOs, senior leaders, and anybody in the ranks, if they ask that question more often, what did we learn here? They come up with way better answers.
Yep, they sure do. And I think they get a lot more buy-in. We now, I think, are in an environment where the culture of commitment is far more important than it ever was. For a long time in my early life, I think I lived in a culture of compliance where we were directed to do things and do them right now. And we didn't have a lot of conversations about the why. We were to follow orders. Now, I think in the world that we're in, I think it's more important to commit to the culture, to buy in, to say, I'm all in, and believe that you're in. Senior leaders have to nurture that buy-in among their team members. And the ones who are going to be top 1%, they've got to nurture the hell out of it. They've got to foster that culture of commitment 24/7. And it's art. Like I said, it's art, not science. If it was science, anybody could do it, and we could go get a recipe book and download it. This is art. And there are times when obtaining the buy-in is going to be more difficult than other times. And in that daily audit tool that I talked about earlier and using it, there were some times when I remember my conversations with myself not being real pleasant because I realized that I had not been fostering learning. I've been directing activity or, being more negative than positive. And I think positive leadership is really essential if you're going to be the best of the best in a highly competitive world, in a global marketplace. And when you're talking about selling, we've got to create a bond very early on with those people we are providing a product and or service to. Create that bond, I think, by not only being the genuine part, but by getting the buy-in you were talking about earlier, Doug. What problem are we trying to solve? If I'm trying to sell you something, I'm not solving your problem, I'm solving mine. But if I seek to understand what your problem is and what service or product I've got can make a real difference in helping you solve that problem, now I've turned the conversation. I've turned the conversation into, meeting and exceeding your needs, not meeting or exceeding mine.
We're speaking with Mr. Robert Mixon. He owns a company called Level 5 Associates. We're talking about the concept he calls the 3 U's, which apply to leadership in the top 1% of earners, in the top 1% of leaders, as well as what I just found out on this call. And I love this concept about positive leadership because, correct me if you think I'm incorrect, please, but the person we think we are and the real you, I have found over my life's experience that a lot of the discord between those two, or the lack of understanding, comes from childhood and how we're brought up and through childhood wounds. And when people kind of make peace with that, they understand who the real you is far more than they did in the past. Is this accurate statement in your estimation? Or where do you find like people act one way, but they're really another way? Where does that come from?
Yeah, I think some of that Jekyll and Hyde stuff comes from probably adolescence or, early times when you were doing back to impression management again.
Yes.
You're trying to impress people, you're trying to make friends, things like that as we do as young people and teenagers, how important it is to belong, to fit in. Some of that cascades right into our adult life and our leadership. And it's hard to divest ourselves of some of those tendencies. Like I said, it's part of our human nature. The impression management construct, I think, is part of our human nature. A lot of it's developed in earlier life and carried on into adult life. It's important once we become adults and we learn about the 3 U's and learn about the importance of reconciling them, that we get through and get past some of the baggage of those younger years. That's part of maturity, I think, Doug.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to get some help. Remember in the Army, you and I had battle buddies.
Yes.
You had a battle buddy. Every rifle squad, every crew section had a battle buddy. And that person was in charge really of taking care of you and you of him or her.
Right.
And it wasn't something you could divest yourself of at points in time during the day, or you could become a jerk from like noon until 6 p.m. and then go back to being a decent human being, because that transparency was pretty absolute in those days. I really encourage corporate leaders now to seek out a battle buddy. And I think all of us, CEOs, CIO, CFOs, whatever our position is, we need someone who can be our trusted advisor, that we can have frank conversations with, that we don't feel threatened, that somebody's going to give us honest feedback this week, next month, next quarter. But sometimes we don't seek out that person and we just go it alone. And, the 3 U's are the bill payer there when the first U just becomes dominant, because you don't have that second U person there, if you will, who can help you reconcile who you really are and what you represent. I really think that tool is powerful if organizations will take it on. I don't think you should mandate it, send people out a message and tell them to go find one. But I think that, in your one-on-one conversations, which are really the most important meeting you can have as a leader, as an executive, those one-on-one conversations that are really developmental in nature, you can coach people in your chain of command to seek out those battle buddies. And that can be a huge benefactor, or I would say a positive in your journey going forward, to have that trusted advisor, to have that battle buddy.
Sales managers hear that loud and clear. Your number one job is to be the battle buddy of your team and grow revenue, but it's to be the battle buddy. And I love when you said that, I wrote it down. I was like, this is so, because I forgot, right? Because I've been out for so long.
Well, yeah, we have.
But running a sales team is about that sales leader being the battle buddy until they find another battle buddy, right? Or they have 2 battle buddies or 3 battle buddies. Right. And the reality is that's creating a huge bond, like we did in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And when that bond, anyone who wants to be in the top 10% of sales, I can tell you concretely, I've measured this over decades now. Mm-hmm. Rapport will sell more than anything else. That huge bond that you're talking about, Robert, will sell more than any other expertise out there in most cases, because if all expertise being equal, the person's going to want to go with the sales entity that they have that bond with, because that builds that trust, respect, and we all like to be around people who are giving us a positive feeling, as you said, positive leadership throughout the day. And so I think that battle buddy, if you don't mind, I'm going to use that going forward in trainings. Sure. That I do.
Certainly wasn't my first original thought, as you know.
So I had a mentor who at the time he was worth about $350 million. And he said something to me regarding what you keep repeating, which is, there's not a lot of wow thought out there. There's a lot of good thinking, and most of the thinking has been thought, right?
Well, yeah, I think so. I used to say the last 2 new ideas were fire and the wheel. I think we might add the internet. We might have 3 new ideas, that's right? True. But I think those are the last 3 new ideas.
It's I really appreciate our conversation. Is there anything that we talked about or haven't talked about that you were like, maybe like, geez, I hope we talk about this or impart this upon somebody?
Well, Doug, we've covered a broad range of topics, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with you and your team of sales professionals out there. To me, I believe that leadership and sales have inherent characteristics, mutual characteristics, and we can learn from both skill sets, if you will. I think they're very closely integrated, but we can learn from both skill sets. And the idea here that really crosses all those topics we've talked about, I think, is having that ability to empathize with the people around you. Empathy gets a lot of press these days as a key component of emotional intelligence. But I don't think it's really been appreciated and practically applied as well as we could do it. I think we sort of transmit some of it into sympathy, which is much different than empathy. Empathy is really putting yourself in someone else's shoes. If we did more of that, then I think we'd be able to reconcile the three U's far more effectively and to help other people do the same thing. So that'd be the other thought I would pass on to you, Doug.
That's a wonderful thought. And, I remember when I was a child that people used to say, well, don't judge a man until you walked into his shoes, right? Or a woman until you walked in her shoes. And I can't walk in high heels, so I don't know how I can ever do that. But
I'm not sure I've tried, but okay, interesting thought.
Yeah. I don't know how women do it. I tried it once, believe it or not, and I was just falling over. So, because I wanted to understand how they could do it. And I just want to touch on one point, which I think you're really great at, because you've been doing that all the way through this podcast together with me, which is you've been imparting positive leadership, but you've been using a lot of stories, and you kind of coalescing holistic points and stories. Is this another trait of a great leader?
I believe it is, Doug. I think we should be effective storytellers, and we should work at it. It's not something that you just roll in hot and do it that way. You got to think about stories as a way of conveying ideas. People love stories. Young people, old people, rich people. I mean, everybody likes a good story. That's why we read novels and watch, series that go on for years and years and years and things like that. We love a good story. So I think as professionals in serving others, which we do as leaders and sales strategists, we got to think about using stories to convey ideas and help people relate. If they can relate to the story, then they can relate to your idea.
Are best stories the ones that are emotionally driven, that they emotionally move someone?
I think so. I think our emotional, we go back to the emotional intelligence conversation here earlier. I think we're emotionally influenced to become motivated. I don't know if you can motivate somebody else. There's scientific discord about this, but I think you can influence somebody else to become motivated. And I think it positively influence others through stories that convey a positive message. And people can say, you know what, I want to be more like that person, or I want to have more of these characteristics and qualities. I'm going to work harder, at leading myself, because that's the first person you got to lead.
Right.
That's why I talked about the three U's when you and I first got together, because I think what we got first what we got to do is figure out, okay, how do I lead myself? Now, once I lead myself more effectively, I can probably do a better job at helping lead others more effectively.
It makes a lot of sense. And we all do this throughout life, where we look at somebody and we go, I want to be like him, or I want to be like her, or I want those qualities. And they motivate us to move in a direction. And this is why I think ongoing education is such an important role in being in the top leadership of the top 1% of earners, because those who constantly or consistently learn are opening up new possibilities to be motivated to aspire to.
Yeah, absolutely. You're never too old to learn. And being a lifelong learner is going to enable you to perhaps reach your potential. but certainly be more aware of what your potential is and be more capable and sensitive to help others identify where their potential is. So it's a win-win, in my view, when you're a lifelong learner.
I'm gonna hit that point again because that was brilliant. I don't know if you.
Wow, I don't know if I've ever been brilliant, Doug. Thanks a lot. That's really cool.
So
I have to get that 3 U's back on.
Yeah, it helps us be more aware of what it is, right?
Yeah.
And I don't. That was kind of like you just kind of softly put that in there, but it was like a lightning bolt came out of this guy, and it was like, pay attention, right? So that was awesome. So, Robert, I really appreciate you being here on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks for bringing your A game, as I knew you would. How do people get a hold of you or learn more? And where should they go?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I have a website, and I guess a lot of us do, but my website is www.level5associates, spell out the 5, level5associates.com. There I have a description of some of the work that I do on behalf of individuals and organizations, a library of the blogs I've written over the past 3 or 4 years on different topics, particularly around my big 6 leadership principles, and a professional reading list. If you want to embark on that lifelong learner journey, I've got a list of books that I find most powerful and appealing. And so that's where I would commend your attention if you want to learn more about me and our Level 5 work.
I highly implore people to go check it out. The information's great. It really is. It's top notch. So thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
And Robert, thanks again for being here. I really am grateful. And I know everybody else who's listening here, I suspect they've got pages of notes just like I do. So thanks again.
Thanks. Wish you well in your journey, all of you.
All right, everybody. I got pages and pages and pages of notes here. And I hope you do too. And if you don't, I'm going to ask, please go back and listen to this again. There were so many brilliant things that came out of this. The person you are, how others see you, the real you, how you handle impressions, like impression management, so you don't let your ego get too far in. You don't let your ego get too far out. It's really important when you're dealing with people to understand where they're coming from, as well, how to bond with them, how to use those outside influences to your advantage in a win-win fashion so that they win and you win. Battle buddy. My gosh, what a great concept. I forgot about a battle buddy, but the reality is that the battle buddy concept is what people do in coaching a lot of times. They'll get a coach to actually have a battle buddy. What's a battle buddy? It's somebody who understands you, gives you direct, honest, and truthful, objective feedback from their perspective so that we can actually gain awareness of what's going on. So it's like having the outside influences who are on your side, looking for you to win and drive to the next level. And certainly if you're leading sales teams or you're leading your company, you want to have your people, they need battle buddies. And the reason that behind those battle buddies is we all need that outside influence to look in and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this that way. How about this? Or your thinking in this capacity is really great. What about this? One of the greatest questions we can ask, no matter what, even when things go right, or even when things don't go right, is what did I learn here? Or what can I learn here? If you're like, well, I don't know what I learned here. What do you think you could learn here? What are some ideas? And write them down. I also love the idea of doing a daily audit on ourselves to keep these 3 in check and to be able to not only keep them in check, but to utilize them and harness the power of the 3 U's. I highly recommend you go check out Robert at, Level 5. You spell out the 5, F-I-V-E, associates.com. Super nice guy, very smart. And always, every time I talk to him, he has so much wisdom to impart. If you love this content of this episode and you think you have content that other people would be interested in, that you could be the expert, or somebody else who's the expert, then reach out to us and let us know. We'll review it. And if they fit the podcast, we'll invite them on. Send an email, if you will, to youmatter, youmatter, at ceosalesstrategies.com. If yourself is looking, or someone you know, I should say, terrible grammar, if you or someone you know, appropriate grammar, is looking to get yourself into the top 1% of earners in your field through selling, if you're looking to train teams of people like that, reach out to myself at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. If you're looking to train your leadership team, your executive team, then Robert would be the guy to go to on that particular one. On the sales side, I'll be happy to help you. As always, if you love the podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Please tell others. The more people that come here, the more people we help. I literally get people who tell me that this has changed the way they do business, changed the way of their life for the positive. And that's one of the reasons we keep doing this over and over again, bringing high quality guests. As always, go out and sell something today. Sell a lot of it. Do it ethically, win-win fashion. Make someone happy, make yourself happy, and to your success. This is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast, signing off.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success,